This came,
All right, so we're recording there. For those of you playing the home version of the game, I'm sending you the disclosures now. So as I mentioned, we're going to talk about the ACUs, the DPOR, and the lead disclosures. Jenny will remember back in the day, we had giant maps on the wall in the office where we had like the giant, like
absolutely.
almost life-size ACUs map and things like that. Now it's all online.
Right.
Virginia Beach has a link on their website where you can search by address, but this is where we want to start because this is the official Joint Land Use Survey ACUs map.
Hmm.
And interestingly enough, it does not apply to Langley Air Force Base. They have noise contour districts in Hampton, but you don't have to disclose where the noise is
Huh.
for Hampton, which I find stupid.
I should remember, yeah.
So this is the Norfolk map here on your screen. So Naval Station, Norfolk Chambers Field, and Norfolk International Airport. I'm going to try and blow this up. Let me know if this works.
Addresses. Oh, there you go, wow.
So this is a PDF that you all have in your email. So you can see,
It's sending that to?
it's in your email.
It's in mine.
Yeah. Here at Chambers Field, they don't have jets at Chambers Field. It's helicopters and prop planes, but they do have some large prop planes that go in there. And you can see the parts of Ocean View, Cape View, Cottage Line area, Willow Terrace, North Side. You have a flight path here. Pamlico, you have a flight path here. And if you've shown property over there, you got some great little cute quintessential 1940s, early 1950s bungalows. And sometimes you'll get like a radar plane flying over you or a small cargo plane flying over you. So we do have to, disclose that there are certain noise zones there. Now, here's something I bet you didn't know. We have noise zones for Norfolk International Airport.
Mhm.
Now, this isn't as prevalent as noise zone disclosures around Oceana and Chambers Field, but they are there. And I think we all do a pretty good job of disclosing, like, oh, hey, by the way, there's the naval base over there, Norfolk Airport's right there. But we have not seen a prevalence of people filling out the ACUs form to indicate where things are with Norfolk Airport. Jenny, would you mind forwarding the email to Carlton that you have there?
Sure thing.
Good morning, Carlton. Jenny's going to send you the forms we're talking about to your email.
Good morning, thanks.
So this may come up
Mhm.
again, but I just wanted to show you that, here at the runway, here's 64,
Okay,
right, which we always see the planes flying over,
Mhm.
a little bit of an office park, some light industrial, but there are houses over here.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
And there are houses, along the edges here where you will get some some aircraft noise.
Right.
Now, if you've had the experience of being on the runway or nearby when a 737 takes off, it's a lot quieter than a fighter
It
jet.
really is, and any of them are, yeah,
Right.
that comes out of Norfolk. Because they fly right over our place
Right.
sometimes, but not as much. Yeah,
So the rest of this form has some explanation about, how it came to be, what's required with real estate disclosures, things like that. But I wanted to focus a little bit more on sort of the elephant in the room. And then Jenny, can you send it to Kathy as well? Kathy Howell.
I saw houses in,
So Kathy, good morning.
Right.
Jenny is sending you the forms that we're going over today. So here, of course, we have Naval Air Station Oceana. And then a lot of times we forget about NALF, Naval Aviation Landing Field Fentress, which is in Chesapeake. And so you have this zone in between, which you can see there's the green bubble there. This is called the interfacility traffic area. And you'll notice that there's not a lot of construction here. There's some, but not a lot. The city owns a lot of land. The state owns a lot of land out here to keep it very low density kind of thing, because the Navy is doing takeoff and touch and goes between Oceana and Fentress. But it's worth noting that we do have some noise zones. So perhaps the more important noise zones that we look at are in Virginia Beach around Oceana,
Mhm.
because, fighter jets make a lot of noise. So,
Oh, I'm behind, right? That's where I sold new homes, and I had the AQ's map
oh yeah,
on the wall, and they were like, "Where are we?" And I'm like, it was like almost in the bullseye.
Right. So one of the things that's worth noting here is
Mhm.
that we have accident potential zones,
Mhm.
APZ, as well as noise decibel zones. And if you remember the Good Friday crash, where the jet took off from Oceana and landed on top of apartment buildings just off Bird Neck Road,
Yeah.
that was pretty much where the Navy said there might be an accident. It was an APZ-2.
Wow.
And that was kind of remarkable. Like, it was just inside APZ-2. And
Because there were no casualties in that.
and we call it the Good Friday miracle
That was-
because not even a goldfish died. There was no loss of life whatsoever, no pets, nothing. So anyway, we can see the circles as they go out. This lighter band here being the 65 decibel. Outside that is what we call less than or negative 65, you'll see in contracts. And I think it's important that we have to let clients know that even though you are outside, because how many of us have sold here in Laurel Cove, in Great Neck Manor and things,
Oh, yeah.
Allenton, you're right on that edge.
not
You're
far.
technically outside of that noise zone, but that doesn't mean that you're not going to have any noise, and it doesn't mean that a jet won't fly over your
Right.
house, right? Because we've all experienced it. I lived at 46th Street at the north end. We had jets flying over all the time, even though we
My
weren't
sister,
in,
sometimes in Laurel Cove, we hear it,
Yep.
occasionally.
especially when we're having the air show, because
Well,
they're all over the place.
They really are.
So, especially for people who aren't from here or have not been around here very long, it's very much worth letting them know about the jet noise. It's great if we can let them experience it. But here we are. So this is the outside,
Mhm.
the noise zone, 65 to 70 decibels, 70 to 75, that's a little bit darker green, and then 75 plus, the dark green. And these areas, right? Here's Washington Square, parts of Great Neck
Right.
Meadows, Hilltop, Lindlear, some very expensive multi-million-dollar homes at Bird Neck Point, Linkhorn Park, and Bay Colony,
Mhm.
right? Blows my mind, just on a practical level, that you have people spending $2 million for a home and they have jets screaming overhead.
Right.
But and Kathy, you're shaking your head. We're in the same boat. Like, I don't get it, but good for you. But it does extend to the south as well, right? We know Red Wing, Dam Neck, Red Mill Farms, all of that. There's some noise there, especially Castleton down London Bridge Road, even parts of Green Run. Right? We often don't think about that part of it over there. And then here around Fentress, right?
Right.
So we have Courthouse Woods and Courthouse Estates, where you get jet noise coming and going. And then here in Chesapeake, Schoolhouse Crossing, Albemarle Acres, parts of the outer edges of Great Bridge with Etheridge Lakes and Emerald Lakes and things like that. You're going to get some jet noise. And I love talking with people that they're not military related, they're completely civilian, right? They don't have anyone in their family who's military. They love our military, they think it's great, but they don't have any, firsthand connection to it. And sort of reminding them that we are very fortunate that the jets flying over us are our jets,
Yes,
right? Because a lot of other countries, it's our jets flying over them,
right.
right? So, the occupying forces that were, US jets flying over US territory, that's great.
Yeah.
Because it's usually our jets flying over some other place and trying to keep them in check. So to see, our jets flying over us, and it's quite marvelous, in the full sense of the word marvel, to see these jets. And in some places in Virginia Beach, we can practically, reach out and touch them, it feels like, especially if you're on top of our upper decks here during the air show.
Right. Yeah,
Um,
you can see a lot, and actually, I'm in total awe when I see it. I'll like pull over and try to get some pictures.
They're great.
Yeah.
So these two forms, like I said, we have them in your email. They're a little hard to read because, they're, you kind of have to guess in some areas.
Mhm.
But the city of Virginia Beach, I know, has it where you can search on their property website within the city to say, okay, not only within their mapping system, like what day of the week is trash, what precinct you're in for the police, but also you can do overlay for flood. You can do overlays for the noise zones, things like that. And we want to make sure that we have the most accurate information because there have been lawsuits over this over the years.
Wow.
And we want to make sure that, you know, when someone is moving here and they have never experienced the jet noise and they buy a house in, say over here in the backside of Bay Colony and they're expecting it's going to be quiet and beautiful and no noise whatsoever, and they have a jet screeching over them at some point, that, you know, they know what they're getting into. Now you will begin to get a sense of what where some of these noise zones are. Let's see if I can blow this up a little bit more, but I don't know that it wants to, you know. And you can see how it divides some houses, some streets, right? And I've had instances myself where I've been showing property and I look at the map or look at the listing and it says less than 65 for the noise zone. I'm like, there's no way. There's jets flying over. There's no way. Well, they're on the other side of the street, right? One side, it's like Bristol, Virginia, Bristol, Tennessee, right? One side of the street's one way, one side of the street's the other. One side of the street is outside the noise zone. The other side of the street is inside the noise zone. So you think you may know, but we want to always, in sort of Cold War, Reagan, Gorbachev fashion, trust but verify.
Right.
So that, now let's go over to the other, whoops, this, and we'll go back over to the actual forms. Oop, that was it. Because now we want to look at the forms actually in practice. That was just the mapping. And so here are the forms. So with the ACUS form, as well as the DPOR form, this is initiated by the seller, right? So the buyer should not initiate this form. It's initiated by the seller because the seller is attesting to the fact that this is where my home lies, right? Now, of course, they're relying on our expertise, and not every locality in Hampton Roads requires this. We talked about Hampton does not require the ACUS because they have noise contour districts, but it's not part of the, it's all related to Oceana. It's all related to Oceana and the whole BRAC thing years ago. The first time BRAC came around. And for the uninitiated, BRAC, BRAC stands for Base Realignment and Closure. This is where they have threatened, what, a couple of times, Kathy, I think over the last 30 years, like, you know, if you don't stop development near the base, we're going to move it to Jacksonville, Florida, or Jacksonville, North Carolina, or, you know, the moon or whatever. But anyway, so these, you know, not required in Suffolk, not required in Hampton or Newport News. Sometimes I think it's good to have just so people know, so you can always say, check the box, say, no, it's not required for this, and then have everyone sign it anyway. So for Virginia Beach, Chesapeake, Norfolk, you'll check the yes box, you'll put the address in here, the official zoning map of, name the locality, Virginia Beach, Norfolk, Chesapeake, and then the sellers have to initial these boxes. So they're going to initial one of the sound boxes and one of the APZ boxes. I really want to point out that the APZ is where we have a lot of problems, right? So the vast majority of property in Hampton Roads is outside, it's outside the APZ, accident potential zone. APZ 2 is a little closer to the base. APZ 1 is really close to the base. And the clear zone does not mean you are in the clear. It means stay clear, right? And that is like right at the ends of the runways. So let's go back to our map and I'll show you that. Back to Zoom, back to share. Right, so these are your clear zones right here. You see that darker blue area? And you can be here, see this is Oceana Boulevard right here, and people park like right here at the end of the runway, and you're in APZ 1. This mid-color blue, that's APZ1. This is the clear zone here. This is more than close enough to watch the jets,
Right.
right? If you're in the clear zone here, stay clear, because this is where you have the potential for parts to fall off the jets, debris from the runways to get kicked up and thrown, aborted landings, aborted takeoffs. There's all kinds of problems that can happen here. And this is statistically, the Navy says, these are where a high incidence of problems could occur. The next likely area is APZ1, right? And this is where they take off or land in these curved areas, right?
Mhm.
APZ2 is the next likely area where you may have problems with an accident, and then the rest of it, you should be okay. Again, you're outside APZ zones, you may still have an issue, right? Because we've seen pilots over the years that they have cranked these jets as far as they can out over the oceanfront resort area and into the ocean and eject. And that's the goal, is to get them away from buildings and life before they have an issue. But the clear zone is stay clear. And you see here's part of Potter's Road here in the clear zone. I think most of them are actually on base, but
Right. I remember on Potter's, yeah, you can see them really good. Something
Yeah.
like that.
so there are not too many properties, I think, that are in the clear zone. Let's look over here at Fentress. Yeah, so it's all on base for Fentress.
Yeah.
But we just want to make sure that when we're checking that box for clear zone, that it's stay clear, not in the clear. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. With the initialing here on the ACUS form, it's just the initials, or just the sellers that need to initial. The buyers don't need to initial there, because we have it down here where the purchaser, the buyers are signing, agreeing that they understand that the decibel noise level zones here and the APZs here, and this is what the seller is attesting to. Fun fact, dB stands for decibel, as we know. Do you know why the B is capitalized? Anyone? Bueller?
Bueller.
The B is capitalized because the Bell part of decibel is for Alexander Graham Bell. So since it is an initial which involves a proper name, the B and the initial, or the abbreviation for decibel, is capitalized. That is your fun fact for the day. If you get on Jeopardy and you get that one right, I get X.
Yeah.
All right, the DPOR form. This is one of my favorites because this is the residential property disclosure statement, and this is not a disclosure statement, right? When you disclose something, you're telling people about it. This form literally is one page that says, well, it says, like in Hogan's Heroes, I know nothing, I see nothing. This page reinforces to the buyer that Virginia is a buyer beware state, caveat emptor. It is incumbent upon the buyer, as well as their agent, to learn as much as they can about the property before closing on it. This is why we have the home inspection. This is why we guide them towards the ACUS maps. This is where we guide them towards crime statistics, flood maps, things like that. We always want to be the source of the source and not the source, right? We talked last time about the CDIF form and the limitations that we have on us. We are lowly real estate agents, right? We are not surveyors with our elevation measurement tools to say, okay, yes, this is outside the flood zone. We are not mold remediators and inspectors to say there's no mold in this house. We want to point people towards the actual information they can get it firsthand, be the source of the source and not the source. When a seller signs this disclosure statement, they are actually disclaiming against the property. They're saying, I'm making a limited number of promises to you, and buyer beware, you go figure everything else out. For people that are familiar with California and other states, they have very lengthy disclosure forms and disclosure processes. You must disclose the age of the roof, the age of the water heater, the age of this, the age of that, the condition of this, the condition of that. We don't have that here. The seller in this form are saying that they're promising that the home is saleable, meaning that they have the capacity and right to sell the property. They are in fact the owner. They're promising that the home is habitable, that there are no pending zoning violations, and there are no defects that they are willfully hiding from the property, so that it can be lived in. And then it's insurable, not that you can get homeowners insurance on it, but you can get title insurance, which is part of the saleable aspect to it. So it's saleable, habitable, and insurable. Those are the only three promises they're making here. Now, there are several other versions of the DPOR form where they have to disclose other things. If there's repetitive loss related to flood, if the property had been formerly used as a meth lab, things like that. If they have an on-site stormwater system. Let's look at the next form, because there are a couple of here. Where are they? Here we are.
Yeah.
Historic districts, resource protection areas. So if they have on-site dams for their property, which we don't really have to worry about, and most of the property we sell, you know, there's going to be some that are on the outskirts, things like that. But basically, if a buyer has any concern about flood areas, conservation easements, radon gas, we don't really deal with a whole lot here. They also see this form, the summary of rights form, as I call it, the chapter 7 form, which explains that, okay, there may be other things at play here, and of course, buyer beware. Right, so this is what I say with this chapter 7 form, the summary of rights. This is a 3-page form that explains the 1-page form that I just had you sign.
Okay.
Right, that's the easiest way to go about it, because so much of this, right, defective drywall, lead pipes, we've covered in the consumer disclosure information form, right? And I will tell buyers, I said, oh, by the way, there's a lot of redundancy in real estate. And oh, did I mention there's a lot of redundancy in real estate? The lead form. This is the one that will kill you. This is one that HUD and the EPA audit on a lot. If you are in doubt about a property and when it was actually built, if it was built in 78, should you sign the form? Yes. If it was built in 79, should you sign the form? Why not? Go for it. You don't need to for 79 and beyond, but if you have some concern, sign it anyway. Disclose that there may be lead paint in the home. You don't know. Buyers can have the home tested for lead. If it was built in the, so there are generations of lead, right? We know there's generations of polybutylene piping, but there are also generations of lead paint. Lead paint was really, really popular in the early 20th century and really came to prominence in the 40s and 50s. Lead in paint causes the paint to be more vibrant, holds the color better and longer, stands up better to the elements. And so it was really a high value add to have lead in the paint during that time period. If you have a house built in the 30s, 40s, or 50s, the likelihood that there's actually lead on the walls as part of the paint is likely, very likely, definitely on the woodwork. From the 60s and 70s, we started to discover that, okay, it's unnecessary to put lead paint on the walls because we have other paints that are out there. This is the age of plastics now. Latex became a thing with paints. Vinyl paints became a thing. And so we could affect paints that would adhere better to plaster in the 60s and 70s. But you still have a lot of people using lead paint in the 60s and 70s on wood. So the wood trim around windows, doors, stairwells, banisters, things like that. And just because it adhered a lot better to the wood and stood up to the use and abuse around door frames and newel posts and things like that. By 78, of course, we said lead is bad, let's get it out of the paint, and we should be in the clear. Fun fact, or I guess fun anecdote, I had a listing appointment years ago over in Broad Park in Norfolk. Young mother, husband was deployed overseas. This house was built in probably 46, 47, 48, somewhere around there. And I walk in and she has drop cloths around the base of the stairs, and she had been sanding the newel post and railing and things like that. And she has kids running around, and you know, I immediately like, oh, stop. What are you doing? You can't do this. You know, lead causes the brain to not develop properly. And the younger you are, the worse it is for you. So think about these young babies. One was in one of those little walker things bopping around. You know, if they're inhaling the lead dust, that can be very damaging. So I explained what was going on. I immediately, when I got back to the office, I emailed her the link, and I have the brochure in here for you. I emailed her the brochure for the lead-based paint in your home. There's also the Renovate Right brochure. And I said, get the babies out, put a mask on, clean this up, take them to the pediatrician as soon as you can, and just start working through the process to make sure that, you know, you are good to go. I didn't get the listing, and I'm okay with that.
Right.
But good morning, you're fine.
Oh.
So I'm okay not getting that listing because, you know, hopefully I at least scared her into doing the right thing and, you know, stopping with the sanding of the banister and whatnot. Anyway, back to this form. So box 3 is for the seller's disclosure, and A1 and B1 are the sellers have knowledge of lead-based paint in the home, and B, the seller has records and documents of lead-based paint in the home. More often than not, they do not, right? So the vast majority of times we'll sign the lead form, it's 3A2 and 3B2. Seller has no knowledge, seller has no reports. This is important when we get to the buyers, and then the buyers eventually become sellers, right? So hold that thread. So the buyer's box here, 4 and 5, if there are knowledge of hazards or reports, they will sign accordingly. So buyer has received copies of all information listed in paragraph 3 above. And then buyer has received a 10-day opportunity to conduct a risk assessment, or buyer has waived that. So if there are reports, buyer will initial, yes, I've received copies of the reports. The buyer will sign, they have received the pamphlet, Protect Your Family from Lead in the Home, which is, looks like this. More often than not, the buyer is simply going to initial 4B, because most sellers don't have any reports, but we always want to give them the Protect Your Family from Lead in Your Home. And then on paragraph 5, it's going to be A or B, right? Buyer has received the 10-day period to conduct a risk assessment and test for lead. And then, or buyer has waived the opportunity to do a risk assessment. So here's how this works practically, right? So holding that thread of seller, buyer, seller, right? Because if someone who buys a home will eventually sell it at some point. So if you have buyers and they say, yes, I want to do a test to know if there's lead paint in the home. Okay. Built prior to 1978, they will come in and they will do little bore testing on the wood frame around the windows, the doors, things like that. They may do some bore samples on the walls. Built prior to 1978, I would place good money. All right, how about this? I'll bet you the cost of the report or the testing, which is about $150. I'll bet you the cost of the lead-based paint test that they will find lead-based paint in the home. So practically speaking, if we just assume there's lead paint in the home, and it's more than likely 17 layers deep, right? Because a home built in 1978 is what, 46 years ago? Somebody check my math. How many coats of paint have been applied to the walls and windows and doors in that home since 1978 or since 1960 or since 1955, right? So that lead paint is now encapsulated. So that's then where we want to point our buyers to the EPA brochure, Protect Your Family from Lead in Your Home, and then the companion brochure called Renovate Right. If a buyer insists on having that lead-based paint test, and it comes back and it says, yes, you have lead paint in your home, and then a couple of years down the line, they come back to us and say, okay, we're ready to sell and move on. What do we have to do now? We have to sign these boxes because now we have knowledge of and reports of lead paint in the home, right? That's not the end of the world, but that could be something that could cause a buyer not to buy a home. We have seen this. I know Jenny has seen it. Kathy, I'm sure you've seen it. People get spooked about polybutylene pipe. They're like, that's it, I'm out. Like, okay, that's your right to exit the contract because you're spooked about poly piping or lead paint. But practically speaking, it's not the end of the world. It might be if you have your toddlers running around and you're sanding the newel post, but not necessarily for most homes. All of these things, as we've discussed about in the consumer disclosure information form, all of these things can be mitigated and worked around. So it's not something that really should stop the show unless someone is just completely, dead set against any of this. So, but we just want to be careful that if a buyer does the lead-based paint testing, it's probably going to be a pointless $150 because I will roll the dice and tell them that you can bet your sweet bippy that you have lead-based paint in the home. And then the question for my buyers, at least, is, okay, if we spend the money and we have lead paint in the home, what are you going to do? Do you want out of the contract? Do you want to ask the sellers to strip all of to bring in an EPA certified hazmat crew, strip all the woodwork, remove all the lead paint from the home, and then you'll buy it? Or are you going to cut and run? More often than not, it's like, well, I'm going to go ahead and buy it anyway because I like the home. In this day and age, this is the only home that's available to me, and I'm the one that won out of multiple offers, and I've got to have a place to live. I'll wear a 3M hazmat mask in the house all the time if I have to. I need a place to live. So if you sort of walk them through how it will game out, they're more than likely going to say, okay, fine, I'll just assume there's lead paint in the home. I will follow the advice of the EPA and renovate the way the brochure tells me to. I will, take precautions accordingly. Because, they could just start going down this huge, rabbit hole and ruin everyone's day. Agent's acknowledgement. This is one, like so many of our forms, that all the agents have to sign as well. When I talked about how HUD and EPA audit files for these forms, they're looking for all of the boxes initiated appropriately, and they're making sure that the agents have signed as well, right? If we look at a purchase agreement and the seller has signed the purchase agreement, the buyer has signed the purchase agreement, and the listing agent has signed the purchase agreement, but the selling agent working for the buyer has not signed the purchase agreement, is it still a valid contract? Yes, it is, because the contract is between the seller and the buyer. Right? Now, Amber and Kat here in the office are going to read you the riot act and say, oh, Ms. Kathy, working for the buyers, you didn't sign here. We need your signature or else we're going to shove bamboo shoots under your fingernails. Right? That's how it works practically. But in a court of law, Judge Judy will still say it's a valid contract because it's between buyer and seller. This lead form is valid insofar as everyone signs it, but if somebody doesn't sign it, God help you, right? HUD will come down on you. So just make sure that you sign those forms. This is the full form in your packets. I just printed the first page of it because it's, 20 some odd pages.
I make them sign that, Jeremy.
I put it in DocuSign and have them initial the front
Yes.
page of it.
Yep.
And then, so with delivery of this form, we used to have them here in the office, little booklets that was cute. Email it to them. That counts as delivery of the documents. Being ultra cautious, like Kathy and me, having them initial the form in DocuSign or in AuthentiSign, really covers your butt. You could also, it probably would be a good idea to also send them the Renovate Right form. And when we send out the video for this, I'll make sure both of those PDFs are attached to it. But we want to make sure that we operate from a point of consumer protection, right? Because that's where the real estate board is really watching us, right? The real estate board doesn't care that I didn't, as a listing agent, I didn't give the buyer's agent a piece of paper. The real estate board is concerned with if I, as an agent of the seller, did not deliver documents to be given to the buyer, right? The real estate board, their life would be so much easier without real estate agents, I guarantee you, right? Just like we say, if it weren't for the people in this business, we could get a lot done. But the real estate board looks at consumer protection, right? EPA is looking at health and safety related to lead-based paint and things like that. So we want to make sure, do our clients know as much as they can know about the property? Is there anything that our clients could say or do and to come back on us? Like, should we have disclosed something? When in doubt, disclose, right? If you're in doubt about being in doubt about disclosing, come talk to us, right? Come talk to Tina, come talk to me, and we'll say, you might want to disclose that. Let's craft language on how to disclose that information so that it doesn't send everyone into a panic, right? We want to be honest, but we want to be diplomatic, right? And we've developed language like that about polybutylene piping. We've just developed language about that, about jet noise, right? It's actually, as we talked about earlier, it's almost kind of fun to have jets doing donuts over your house from time to time. Prior to the invention of the DVR with your cable box, it was real annoying, right? Because I was listening to that, now you can pause TV and it's like, okay, let the jets go over.
Right.
Okay, now we come back and I'll see what that joke was, or listen to that song they were singing or something like that. But we want to make sure that, especially our buyers, are as well informed as they can be, that we game out certain processes with them, right? I have clients right now, they're making an offer on a house built in 1955. We had the same discussion yesterday about lead paint. Because they said, it's an older home, might have lead paint. Like, okay, yeah, let's talk about this. What does that practically mean? And we looked at the home in the 50s. I said, it might be on the walls. It's definitely in the woodwork. I would place good money on that. Let me send you the Renovate Right brochure so you know that when you're doing renovations and opening up walls or getting new windows installed or whatever, that you take the right precautions. And if you have a contractor coming, it's like, oh, we don't need to worry about that. Well, you might. Right? Because not every contractor cares about their health as much as you should care about yours, right? I've worked in construction. I've seen some of these idiots on scaffolding and, mixing up hazardous materials and things like that. Don't always trust the contractor, but, just make sure that they know what they're getting into and make sure they know that you're there to help them find more resources, right? We're not going to go in there with our own little lead testing kit and say, oh, yes, here's lead, here's not lead. But say, hey, we could do this. Here are the ramifications of it. Here's documentation and reports and brochures on it. You want to talk to a licensed lead mitigation company? Let's go get some recommendations and referrals and talk to the home inspector. Let's talk to contractors licensed for this and just be there as a resource for them and make sure that they're educated. So that's really all I have about the ACUs, DPOR, and lead forms. Anybody have any questions or any other tales from the trenches? Because this is where we get to have some fun with these very innocent, innocuous 1 to 2 page forms.
Are you issuing that on Homes Built Chapter 78, so everybody gets this regardless of their?
So the question was, with the lead-based paint form, homes built after 1978. I have every now and again for a home built in like 1979, I've had a lead-based paint form signed just to err on the side of caution, but technically, legally, no. Anything built in the tax, if you have verifiable independent information like the city tax record that says the home was built in 79 or after, you don't have to do it. Now, interestingly enough, state law requires that for a rental property, regardless of age, we have a lead-based paint form signed, and there's a special lead form for rental properties that says this home was built in this year, whatever, let's 1982, and therefore is or is not subject to lead-based paint disclosure. That may seem like overkill, but by the same time, it's like, okay, well, if we do it for rentals, why don't we do it for resale? Or if we handle it this way for resale, why do we do something different for rentals? But for resale, it's homes built in 1978 or before. Yeah.
Cool.
Anything else? No? Smiling faces. Love it. All right. Thank you all very much indeed. Tomorrow we have our sales meeting here at the office, conversations, coffee, closings, commissions,
Yeah.
a cornucopia of cool information. We will be talking about the removal of the COM1 form, the commission
Oh,
form, and what we need to do to make sure that we protect our compensation. Again, so I talked with Tina yesterday about that we will be talking about tomorrow. So spread the word, let everyone know, and we look forward to seeing you tomorrow.
Hey, guys, I have a construction walkthrough at the same time, and I know this is going to be a very important meeting. If anybody could take notes for me, I would greatly appreciate it.
No, you need to reschedule your construction walkthrough.
I can't.
The builder should know that they work for us, not the other way around.
They were like 10 o'clock.
Yeah, we'll make sure we got you covered.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you,
Jeremy.
everyone. Have a great day.
Bye.
Drive
See
safe,
everybody.
Carlton.
All right.